I asked Herndon this question, and I hate that I can't stop myself from asking it because I think it's a dumb question to ask you, but I have to ask. Do you have a favorite Tortoise record? Podular Modcast, as always, is brought to you by the lovely folks over at Patchworks. Patchworks is more than just a synthesizer, music gear shop. They're building a community by connecting you to the joy of music with workshops, classes, live music events, and friendly, knowledgeable staff. They are there to help you with wherever it is you are at in your music making journey. Located in the Wallingford neighborhood in Seattle, stop by Patchworks showroom to play with your favorite music gear and join their community. And if you don't live in the Pacific Northwest region of the world, then head over to patchworks.com, patchwerks.com, where they have not just the latest and greatest in modular, but all sorts of synthesizer gear, as well as home studio equipment. Once again, that is patchwerks.com, patchwerks.com. Hello and welcome back to Podular Modcast. My name is Tim Held. This week we have a lovely conversation with Dan Bitney from the band Tortoise. Dan is the third of 5 members of Tortoise to be on the show, and I'm hoping to get all of them on this year. We have a lovely chat. Dan is very charismatic, very affable, and charming as the day is long, and we are going to get into that conversation shortly here. But first, I want to tell you about some cool events that are coming up. The first event I want to tell you about is this here, the Gay Daisy Carnival 23, Sunday, August 6th, 3 to 9 in Portland. There's an address there. I'll put a link in the show description. And $10, all ages, should be a good time. And the second event is the Tacoma Porch Fest, and I will actually be playing this. It's August 5th, and basically it's just this huge neighborhood in Tacoma where people with front porches donate them as performance spaces, and it's a full day festival with people playing on porches and stuff. I don't know how I found this, but I just threw my hat in the ring, and it turns out I'm playing it. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest and you want to come hang out with me and maybe watch me play some music from a stranger's porch, then sweet. Link in the show description. So what else do we have to talk about? I, of course, want to thank the sponsors for Podular Modcast: Patchworks Seattle, After Later Audio, Novation, and 4MS. I'm still working on building those kits from 4MS. I may have screwed one up. Totally my fault. Kind of embarrassed about that. But yeah, thank you to all the sponsors for their support. I would also like to take a moment to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon. If you would like to help keep the LEDs blinking over here at PodMod, you can head to patreon.com/Podular Modcast. Look at these great membership options here. Because you love the show, $3 a month. The PodMod Bod Super Ultra, $5 a month. Because you love the show, Ultra Deluxe. They all have access to the Discord server, and look at this. Look at these recent posts. Ooh, was that a giveaway I did recently? Ooh, am I going to do another giveaway soon? Early access to cool videos. I was doing bonus episodes for a while, so there's some bonus episodes up there, and I think just to try to get people to sign up, I'm going to put my cover of This Must Be the Place Naive Melody that I did for Hannah. I'll put that on the Patreon. I'm very, very bashful about my singing, and if you want to hear it, you can do that by becoming a Patreon subscriber. And as I mentioned in the last couple weeks, I am interested in working with you on a music video. Does that sound like fun? If so, you can reach out to me via Instagram or email. If you're watching the video episode right now, then right behind me, you can see a clip of a music video that I recently collaborated with someone on, and I think it's pretty cool. And so if you like what you see, and this one's pretty erratic and gritty and crazy. I don't have to do that, but I do like doing erratic and gritty and crazy. But yeah, if you want to work with me on something like that, then let me know. Okay, that's about it for the intro to this episode. Let's get into our chat with Dan Bitney.
caffeine.
Yeah, I've had my daily dose already. Well, part of my daily dose.
I like your artwork. Is that a screensaver? Oh, that's a Herndon. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That
Yeah.
was funny.
So yeah, actually, John Herndon and I became kind of like internet buds a while ago because he's a tattoo artist, and I've really wanted to get tattooed by him at some point because I like his artwork.
Yeah.
And then I just said, hey, if you ever get in a modular, let me know. And he had just been talking to John McIntyre about getting his case. So I sent him like a little goodie bag, and as a thank you, he sent me this sweet painting.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah,
That's
really,
great.
really cool. So I like to start kind of the same way with everybody, and this is probably something you've been asked a lot over the years, but I'm curious. Well, where'd you grow up? And then within that question, was there a song or an album or an artist in as far back as you can remember that kind of made you, that just really like, oh, music is my thing? Just like that connection that we all have, that early connection where that this is. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, my story, I could tell you that like it's super generic, and you could probably even just guess it. But the maybe interesting part is growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, which is kind of like this crazy liberal oasis.
Mm-hmm.
And I was growing up in the 70s and 80s too, so kind of a different world. It was, yeah, I think it was pretty peculiar growing up in that time and in that space, just with a giant university. Like a giant university was my backyard. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, you're talking like the early years, just being exposed to like culture and music and art, and then getting into like petty crimes, breaking and entering. You start to learn where the buildings that are fun and where there's steam tunnels and underground passageways and rooftops. And but that's later on. Those are the teen years. But the music thing, that's what I was referring to earlier, because I mean, I'll give you one guess what band turned me on.
In the 70s or 80s?
This would be 70s. Early, probably like pretty early 70s.
Pretty early 70s. I've got a few things.
I don't know. Maybe it's not super obvious.
I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take three guesses. I'm going to say Sabbath, Zeppelin, or The Who.
No, you're too deep.
Oh,
you're too
deep. Too deep.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. It was the Beatles.
The Beatles. Oh, well, yeah.
My uncle like went in the Navy, dropped off like 20 records, Rubber Soul. I don't know the other ones. And we had one of those Magnavox consoles in the basement. That was like a tube amp. Like, oh shit! I swear there were 12s. Yeah, maybe there were 10s, but I think there were 12s with horns. So it's like, that
thing
was
like, then that thing blasted and sounded good.
Yeah, quality reproduction of recordings. So that was my first. Like, I distinctly remember being super psyched to like go home and listen to the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just see on TV, you see people playing. You're like, why is the drummer playing with his arms crossed? But then you're like, well, that's how you do it, I guess. So that was my first turn on, kind of. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then, the next step was the older brother. It was like, hey, check out Sabbath. You're like, oh, okay. More of the wave of what you're talking about.
Well, it's so funny. Like, that is, it seems like there's always this like kind Sherpa or guide that's older, whether it's the uncle who gives you the records or older brother or your friend's older
Yeah,
sister or whatever. You always get the good shit from that older person who you look up to, and that's
it's
how I
true.
found like
Yeah.
punk rock and stuff. Jumping on my
Right, right,
trampoline and at 12 years old listening to the Descendants.
right.
But I mean,
Yeah.
mine is. I mean, I'm not even as generic as I am corny. Like one of my first real loves. I mean, other than like when I was really young, I really liked Roy Orbison and Dwight Yoakam because that's what my dad was listening to. But I got super
Well,
into
that's
Garth Brooks,
beautiful.
man. So, but Garth Brooks is a little
Right.
more on the. But yeah,
Right.
you can't help what and you until that older person passes those new cool things on you, especially before the internet, you only have access
Yeah.
to what's
Limited.
around you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Super limited access.
yeah.
Radio.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. I only had a country radio station and then like an R&B station growing up. So like
Where did you
I
come
just
up? Where did you grow up?
um how familiar with Washington State are you?
Not very familiar at all.
I grew up smack dab in the center. So like we have the Cascade Mountains dividing the state pretty much.
Right.
And I was in my graduating class was 84 people. I was in a town called
Right.
Roslyn,
Okay.
Washington. Do you know that show
Wow.
Northern Exposure? Do you
Yep.
remember that show? So that was
I do.
filmed in Roslyn, Washington when I was a little kid. So I remember
Oh,
going
that's
down and
great.
seeing the set and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that those
Wow.
limitations.
Yeah. And you're old
um,
enough to have experienced like the pre-internet,
I'm right.
like
I
you
am like
came up.
right in that line. Yeah. Like I didn't
Wow.
really
Yeah.
start
Nice.
utilizing the internet regularly until college. Like it
Right. Yeah.
existed early high school, but it was kind of like, ask Jeeves, let it dial up and load shit for a while.
Oh man. And then like remember when somebody would like send you a song and you'd be like, 8 hours? What the
Yeah.
hell is going on with my computer? They'd be like, it would be like some shitty song, and you're like,
Uh-huh. But you
okay, I
could
know
find
why
those
you
like
did that, but why did you do that?
you find
Oh,
those like MIDI files that like ended up becoming like the Nokia ringtones. You could like find those like versions of the songs you wanted to hear. But yeah, pretty much guitar tabs is all I used the internet
right.
for
Yeah.
until college. So with respect to the wanting to participate, I kind of wanted to frame this with an observation now that I've seen Tortoise live 3 times, I think. I think you're the only member in the band that plays just about everything that's on the stage. Like you'll pick up a bass, you'll pick up a guitar, you'll do the keys, you play the drums, obviously, and the marimba xylophone setups that you guys have.
Right.
What was the thing that made you want to be a participant, and what was that first instrument? Like what was the
It's pretty.
artist?
Wait, with Tortoise or with
With
my
you.
musical
So
journey?
after you find the Beatles, now you love music.
Right. Right.
What
Okay.
now
Yeah.
you want to participate?
Right, right. I get it. Yeah. So I mean there was always a piano at our house, and the older brother had an acoustic guitar. And yeah, we would do funny stuff. We would like dress up like Shana Na and stuff. You know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah.
Like we'd like grease our hair back and be like, "Hey, we're rock and rollers,"
Did you put on like
and
little
we jump
shows for
around
when your
with this
parents had friends
Magnavox
over?
like blasting, and we jump around the basement like pretending we were rock stars or
That's
something.
so cool.
So that was like the fantasy part.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know, it's just like, I mean, then I got in school band or whatever, and of course I wanted to play drums. One of my older brothers played snare drum, and of course you're a kid, you're a dude, you're a little dude, you're like, hell yeah, I want to play snare drum.
Yeah.
And the musical director's like, well, how about saxophone?
Right.
And my mom had played sax, so I was like, well, why not? And I'm
Mhm.
happy I did, because then I got some skills reading, which I totally don't don't employ at the moment. But
Mhm.
it just took me somewhere else. The guy needed his chair filled or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that was like the initial participation.
Yeah.
Um, those were hilarious. I tell stories about that of like playing like talent shows or something, and we had what's the Barry Manilow tune?
Man, dude.
God, I can't remember it now. It's probably best I don't even say it. But
Yeah.
I was playing alto saxophone, and it's like you're not playing the singing part. You're playing some harmony, some like structural stuff. And of
Uh-huh.
course, like I'm reading to like the 15th bar or something. Then of course I just like, well, I'm like, I don't know, I don't know where I am. I'll just start like joining the melody. But yeah, just the rush of like the curtain going up and just being like, oh God, like look at all those faces.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it an exciting thing, or was it kind of a like half parts nerve wracking
super
and
scary? Yeah, exciting and scary, kind of both.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like getting it that early is good given the profession that you ended up with. So yeah, I got
and
that.
then I guess it was always just like everything, hanging out with friends or whatever, and you just try to play whatever was there.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, just like a high school cover band, where that was the same way too, like playing in some park on the 4th of July weekend, for like it was like a teen rockers, and we had a dude that could play Eruption. We had
oh shit, holy
our
yeah,
guitarist could like fully do Eruption, so we were just like we had it, it was kind of hilarious.
So
he went
I'm
on.
not
He's a Doug Olson. He's like a engineer from Smart Studios. He went on to be a really good audio engineer.
I was going to ask, I'd hope that a kid in high school playing Eruption went on to continue those pursuits. I have a handful of stories just like that, playing at like older kids I was, because of the young, the size of my town, there wasn't a lot of musicians, and I started playing drums, never taught anything, just got a drum set and like just could kind of play, rock drumming. And because of that, all the older kids wanted a drummer for their band, and then the pep band in high school needed a drummer, and their star drummer graduated, and the band teacher hated me because I didn't know how to read music. I wasn't in band, but I could play well enough to do the football games and shit. And I just fucking played like a punk drummer, and he hated it, but everybody else was into it. So
right. It sounds like a fun position.
It was super fun.
Like
yeah,
you're not trying to kiss his ass or anything. You're just like, I'm just gonna have fun,
Yeah, there was a little bit of that, like that teenage kind of like you fucking need me, so you can't tell me, like, because there's nobody else. Not that I'm the best. There's literally no one else that plays. So,
jeez,
it was cool too, because like all the older kids, although like the high school football players and basketball players, Timmy, play Wipeout. So I just like they just thought it was the coolest thing because I could fucking play Wipeout.
Right.
Yeah. So were drums
single strokes?
I mean, I probably didn't do it right, but yeah, just the
Right.
I'm sure I was. Yeah. There's no like what are not paradiddles? What are they called? Rudiments or anything like that. Which is actually something that I've just started kind of practicing. That drum set that I got, I ended up getting rid of because I was going into college and didn't have a house or anything. I couldn't take a 5-piece kit with me.
Right.
And I went over 20 years without a kit. So I lost my chops. Wow. And then I don't know if you could see this awkward looking post behind me, but this is just a little Roland V drum, like 4-piece. So nice. I've been practicing for I've had this about a year, and actually John Herndon and I, once we started kind of chatting, I was giving him modular tips. He was giving me drum tips and gave me some books, to check out. So yeah, it was pretty cool to have like, oh shit, one of the drummers from Tortoise is kind of giving me a little bit of drum tutelage here. That's pretty cool. So were you playing drums? Was that kind of is that your love? Like when you were playing in high school bands?
Again, it was a very passive decision. I was in a hardcore band called Mech Mensch, in Madison, and we shared a studio space with another band, and their drummer just flaked, So we'd go, we'd do high school, get on our skateboards, roll over to this house, pull some bongs, and, write songs about like, fuck you, Reagan, and whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other drummer doesn't turn up. So I'm just like, I'll play drums, and I could just kind of like exactly what you're talking about. It's like I've seen it enough. I knew I could go like do ba do da do da do da do da.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like, very passively joined a band. And from there, that band kind of just got bigger.
Yeah, I was gonna say you started touring pretty young, right? Like you got in like a
super
pretty
young.
like a pretty big band for someone your age at that time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it was like 84 or something. I was like right out of high school. Awesome, crazy experiences like opening for the Misfits in New York,
Holy
shit like that. Super
Fuck
crazy
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
We crashed. We had a van crash
Holy shit.
in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we were supposed to play the next day with Minor Threat in
fuck.
DC. But there's a Minor Threat video where at the end they pull us out of the audience, and we were sitting on stage like it's like all these bald-headed little white kids. I think I didn't do it. I think I was the only one that was like, I'm not going up there, man.
Yeah.
But
and what was this band called?
There, Minor Threat video. So,
what was this band called that you were?
This band is it's got a name that's it's a very complicated name. Maybe? It's actually, the name itself is its meaning. Its meaning is it's two words, and its meaning is a really rough situation that you cannot get out of. That's the meaning of these two words. But it's also I'm just not going to say it. It's also could be deemed a racial insult or a racial slur.
I see. Okay.
Do you know the band I'm talking about or no?
I just cannot get the Dire Straits joke out of my head, but I can't. I mean, I know it, but I'm blanking on it right now. But I think everybody could figure it out. We don't have to say it.
And it was a great experience, being in that group, because we put out records on SST. It was like we're hanging out with everybody in the 80s and stuff, going to Europe, like having disaster tours and losing money and never getting paid, and just it was hilarious and beautiful.
You're like it's like
that's
the
when I was a drummer. Then I was just a drummer. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because you probably just didn't have time to really do anything else with all that touring.
But I always had like a synthesizers. I was always into like beatboxes. I always had a love of that stuff too. Although like a really kind of like, especially at the time, a real kind of like homophobic or racist view about like house music and stuff. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Kind of being like, that's what music or whatever.
Right.
Which now
I actually appreciate you saying that, because I feel like that's something that I don't hear a lot about, but something I definitely experienced in my small town of Roslyn, Washington. Like I had to secretly listen to Wu-Tang Clan, and I and I just didn't like.
Well, even that stuff's hard though. You can, you know what I mean? It's not
right. Well, I mean, and then female singers, I didn't feel like I could actually like say I liked female fronted groups or songwriters until I was, old enough to realize like that was fucking stupid to but peer pressure or being in a small town, pre-internet, all of this stuff,
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. I was thinking about somebody, it was like a statement of like, there's like this new hardcore, and they're like, we're gonna take it so it's not just a white male thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I was thinking to myself, like, that's the hardcore scene in the Midwest. A lot of it was intermeshed with the gay scene. You know what I mean? There were people that were vocally very out. that were leading these bands. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I was like, it's never that simple. I don't think. I think I really appreciate where it's going, for Black people to be able to like, I mean, whatever, but one of the best hardcore bands ever, our friends from DC, Bad Brains, so I don't know, but that was interesting.
Man, that's like you were like steeped in like one of the, I would say like one of the more significant kind of movements of like American like rock music, like the hardcore scene in the 80s, like going to DC and like in SST and all that. That's legendary shit right there, man. That's so cool that you got to be in that world.
I mean, I'm just super grateful to, I mean, Bucky Pope wrote insane, beautiful music, and Robin Davies kind of ran our own labels and really just organized. He was, he brought everybody to Madison. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of, and I don't think he even paid himself. He was just like, yeah, I just want these people to play here and stuff,
Yeah, it seems like the Midwest over, to New York, DC, Baltimore, and all that. Like, I have this theory that because you don't have any giant mountains to block your travel, like when I went to Western Michigan University for grad school in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So that was like my first like experience in the Midwest. And it was just blew me away how many, and then of course I just didn't do school. I did it, but it was not my main priority. I joined bands and just became friends with the music scene. But I remember those, like a lot of bands driving to Madison or all the way out to the Twin Cities on like a weeknight to play a bar show. And that's like the equivalent of driving from here to like Northern California. But no, like we don't fucking do that. Like if we have to go play in Portland, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of far.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just seemed like that's like everybody was super connected and willing to just get on these really long straight shots and just barrel down the road in a van. And
yeah,
it seemed like a really cool time. So is that how you end up in Chicago then?
Yeah, I mean, so that scene kind of dissipated in the late 90s. At that point I had I had like funk bands and just kind of playing the same bars in Madison. Lee Perry cover bands. It was just absurd, and then, really, I had a friend who was in Chicago and he just moved here with his band, which was kind of like a rap reggae band. And he had this like 3-bedroom apartment and one extra room. He's like, yeah, it's like 190 a month or something. And I was like, okay, like I'm just going to do this,
Yeah.
My phrase is that I got like super brave and moved 140 miles away from home,
I've got friends who still live in yeah.
in all respects, like it's another world, like Madison and Chicago are definitely different worlds,
Yeah, I mean, Chicago's just so vast, like the first time driving out to Kalamazoo, the only real city I'd been in was maybe, other than Seattle, was LA when I was a kid. And that's so sprawling. So driving through Chicago, I was like, holy this is what a city is. Like it blew my mind. Cause Seattle is geographically the actual like city when you're looking at the skyline is pretty small. So
it's hard for me to ever, just because it's dissected and stuff. I can't ever really gauge how big it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We have just our physical geography out here is just, there's so many mountains, rivers, lakes, and the Puget Sound. It just really disrupts everything. So we're getting around in just the state can be kind of arduous,
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. It's got to have a psychological effect, right? If it's all kind of like.
Yeah. Well, and I also think like that lent itself to, I have a theory also, because it's the it's the upper left corner of the, people settled, white people settled from east to west. And I think people came out here because they didn't want to be bothered. They were the antisocial people, and that's why you get things like the Seattle Freeze and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't
Wow.
know. I don't
Yeah.
know how much truth is in that, but then you could even further isolate yourself into your little packs because, getting over the sound is kind of hard or whatever. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we're a
Yeah.
bunch
I
of
believe it.
weirdos for sure.
I believe it.
So $190 a month for a room to
Yeah.
rent
No,
is a
it
pretty
was
sweet
cheap. It
deal.
was really cheap. Yeah. So I showed up there and I call Herndon and I'm like, yo, let's hang out. I moved here.
How did you meet John?
We
So
were
he
already
used,
like our bands would already, like I would see,
okay.
all right. So he played, this is a good one. He played in this band that was kind of like cabaret kind of rock, but they would rock, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And it was called Maestro Subgum and the Hole. And it was
Okay.
kind of like, and he was like this punky orange dreadlocked drummer. And they played a show in a building that one of my bands rehearsed in. And I knew the people that were hosting him or them, the band, or putting on this performance. And he was like out on a skateboard or something. At one point, he just jumped off the skateboard. And then I jumped on the skateboard and just kind of pretended to steal his board or whatever. And yeah, I think it was basically love at first sight, I think, for me.
Yeah. Nice.
And I took him to a half pipe. I took him to a giant half pipe the next day.
Uh-huh.
And we just stayed in touch after that. I mean, obviously, like I was like, oh, holy shit, this guy can play, like another level. But yeah, so then I called him and it was like, basically the Tortoise loft was like 2 blocks south of my
nice. Nice.
So like, here I was ready. I was like, okay, it'd probably be like a bus to the train, take a train to somewhere else, and then walk a quarter mile, but like, of course, but that's how it was
like,
too.
Wait
like
a
that's
minute.
economics, right?
Yeah, right. Totally. Everybody's kind of, you're all in the same socioeconomic bracket at that point, being like
Wicker Park.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, boom, okay, 90s Wicker Park, and the Tortoise Loft,
Okay.
So
at this point, it's him.
It's all decades, right? It's just like, okay, switch the decade now,
Yeah. So is this at the point where him and Doug are kind of like forming Tortoise then?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not involved in it actually initially. Like they make the singles. I think they make the 2 singles. And they have the show that the X is supposed to play, but the X can't get in the country.
Oh, shit.
And I saw that. I was like watching that from, out in Lounge Acts. And then I don't know if at that point then they started making the record, and then Johnny was like, "Hey, like, it would be cool if you were a part of this." And to me, it was, once again, it wasn't like, "Do you want to be in a band?" It was kind of like almost like this passive, like, "I think I'm in this band," But it wasn't even. That's the furthest thing from what I was even thinking when they were like, "Oh, come to the studio this week. We're making this thing." Like for one, because the music was so different than, I was playing in, like I said, like funk cover bands and rapping and,
like, yeah.
Basically being a moron, wait, I shouldn't say that, but, just a goofball or whatever.
Right.
And then I go in the studio and it's like, it's these like dark textures and, I was like, whoa, okay, and of all things, Johnny was like, man, do you have timbales? And I was like, yeah, I got some old like Ludwig timbales. He's like, bring those in for this one thing. And I was like, so that was like my initial kind of like, entrance, I guess, to the Tortoise world at that point. And
so
then
at
it was
this
like
point,
the song. Yeah.
Is Matt and John McIntyre's part of it at this point? So it's like
Yep.
John, Doug,
Yeah. At that
the
point, it's
Johns,
still
Doug, and
Bundy.
you.
Yeah, Bundy and the Johns and Doug and me. And like, I even think like Brad Wood's kind of around still too, but
Okay.
not really in a super active way,
Okay.
but he's,
So
he's in some of those pictures early on and stuff.
right.
And then it was like, I just added percussion, like the djembe stuff on Spiderwebbed.
Okay.
I don't think I played any, anything other than that really on the first record, like just weird percussion here and there. But then, then you go to play live and it's like, oh, well, who can do the, like somebody played vibes and melodica, you know what I mean? So
Right,
it's like, well, I
right.
can't play vibes and melodica. It's like, well, I didn't do anything, so I'll play, I'll do the vibes part.
Right.
So that's kind of, and just, that's the basic entrance into like the multi-instrumental thing, and having that be an asset, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Because it's not necessarily an asset for a professional musician in a way that most people will just focus on one thing. You know what I mean? And that's their gift, their, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. But you guys all had like, I think just going back to you saying there was always a piano around, I think just starting there at a young age is just like such a good, like, leaping off point for being able to kind of go out and do everything.
But I don't think I never took advantage of what, you mentioned rudiments earlier, like what rudiments can do for you. To me, it was always like, I don't want to have chops. Fuck chops, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're coming from the hardcore scene. You're like,
you know what I mean? It's sure you can do rolls or whatever, or triplets, but like you're not gonna, you're not gonna do Phil Collins shit or whatever. I don't know. That's a bad example. You know what I mean, though. It's more of an attitude, like a fuck you attitude, and then at some point you're like, you mature as a musician or as a person. And you're like, well, like I like jazz, like, oh, jazz is fun, or even like going back to the point of multi-instrumentalists, being turned on to like Sun Ra at a pretty early age, and like all the AACM stuff from Chicago, that would wash up to Madison. They would bring, big bands up there. I would see, members of the art ensemble up there regularly playing with combos and stuff,
That's awesome.
And that taught me like the big band stuff. It's like really kind of like you play your part and then you're kind of chilling. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like everybody isn't blowing at the same time. And I was like, wow, yeah. I was thinking like it's like basketball, you gotta have dudes just hanging out that at the end of the show they're gonna have, they're still gonna have energy or whatever.
Right. Well, I imagine
so
also
that's
like
kind of stuff I took into account for Tortoise. Was like, yeah, it's very restrained and beautiful and dark. Don't rap on this stuff.
Yeah, it would have been a lot different. I imagine being in a band with the Johns as well. Like, and I'm sure this like applied to all three of you, but just all three of you being drummers, like I'm sure that there was maybe a sense of healthy competition, or even just like sharing knowledge, or like, hey, these guys are getting really good. I gotta, keep up the pace, or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting chemistry because and I think some of my like instrumental swing stuff, it's like I don't have a kit on stage. Like they each specifically have kits on stage. And it would be a little ridiculous to have 3 kits on stage.
Yeah, but like, did you have to like, like acclimate to how because it's such a personal thing to have the way your drums are set up.
They have super different setups. Yeah, McIntyre, he can't ever have his hands touch his legs when he's drumming.
Yeah,
so he's got a low.
And I feel
seat.
like you play his more often. Is that right, or am I off?
I do. Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah, there's certain songs, like if there's 2 different songs and it flips or whatever. But I started having my seat super high at home and playing
Mhm.
around Chicago. I don't know why. I started seeing people doing it and I was like, oh, I'm going to try it.
I did the same when I was starting out.
Yeah.
Like,
So I don't
yeah.
know. It started to feel good, but then my seat will just be like, the end of the show, you're like this. Like, wait a minute, that's my hi-hat up there. Oh.
Yeah, I've always
But
wondered
I
about the
can say in the
dynamic,
beginning,
but
man,
yeah.
I definitely was intimidated by both of their skills. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
McIntyre came out of the super rudiment land
Mhm.
of core, and Johnny always had this like super articulate kind of. He wasn't like a jazz drummer, but he would just be working on like singles and doubles around the kit, and I'd be like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That at the Seattle show, he didn't do it at the Portland show the next night, I noticed. So it was definitely he was just feeling it or something. But he like towards the end of the set was like almost like standing up and like just beating the shit out of one of his cymbals, but it totally worked. I was just like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, cause I could see cause I know like you and him both have some like punk hardcore background. So it's like, it's still cool to see that shine through in some
Right,
relatively not very punk or hardcore sounding music, but
right. Rage just has
yeah,
to come
just
out.
rage. Oh man. So yes,
He's
I
he's
mean,
probably he's probably just psyched to be done with that rental kit or something like that. Can't remember if they were good or not that night. That's hard when you just have a different kid every day, and I don't know. It's not that
I
hard, I
can't even
guess.
imagine. Um, Well, yeah, I mean, they're very specific setups too, so like
Yeah,
just wrangling. I'm sure you guys have connections and with John McIntyre being in the Northwest, I'm sure it was not too hard to find somebody in Seattle, but yeah, that's still
yeah,
just one more thing to have to consider and um
yeah,
yeah. Uh so I want to get your take on this because I've again talked to both of the Johns about this because it's just so funny to me that a band with three drummers, it wasn't the plan, at least from what I've gathered. It wasn't like, hey, let's start a band with three drummers. It just kind of turned out that way. So I
yeah. I
kind of
mean,
want to hear
really,
like your version of that.
yeah. I mean, it's exactly that. Okay, so working in the studio, it seems more like we're making art or something. You know, and that's what
Mhm.
I felt like. Oh, we're making like, and I never thought. Some people they'll have a plan like, all right, we'll get a woman singer, we'll have this punky bass player, and then
Mhm.
and this was just like I just thought like this was the furthest thing from my mind as far as like what do I do about a career in music? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was, I was a bike messenger and started working at the Rainbow, the bar that we all went to or worked at. I was like cleaning the toilets and bartending on afternoons. And I thought it was just like, I really thought it was like a local thing. We knew a lot of people in Chicago. I guess when we went to New York the first time, and I realized it was just bigger than that. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
realized like, oh, we all know like a couple hundred people in New York too. You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
was like, oh,
Right.
and they're into it. And like, and then like, I remember like working at the bar, just, it was Johnny and me, and we had Thursday nights, and it was just a madhouse. It'd just be packed. It was before like all the catastrophes where they did limiting occupancy or anything like that. Like bars would just be like, "Yep, go on in," and you'd be like,
Uh-huh.
smoke,
Oh my
chain
God.
smoking,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and Johnny's like, "Oh man, I got a royalty check for you," and I was like, "A
Oh,
royalty check?"
what?
And he handed me a check, and I opened it, and I went from just being like. I was like, bing. I was like, all right, what can I do? I think I was like the happiest, prick bartender in Chicago. And I was just like, wow, and it was like, and Nirvana was, Nirvana. Nirvana was like
Mm-hmm.
peaking out, popping
Mm-hmm.
off,
Right.
So it was like people were like, okay, So I don't know, that was my experience of like kind of the beginning of like, what the hell,
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it was probably hard to notice at the time, but you were like entrenching yourself in the second, like pretty significant, like blooming scene, like that
Yeah.
Chicago scene, the early Thrill Jockey, Shrimp Boat, and all of that stuff, kind of
Yeah.
happening at the same time. Like, um,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
I mean, what do you think that is? What do you think? I mean, it's definitely like economics. It's weird economics.
I
Like,
think, yeah, pushing all
and
these like-minded
Chicago, I can
people into the
describe
same.
better.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned Nirvana because I'd never even considered Nirvana's success and what they did to like rock music in the popular culture. But I've never thought of it like having a trickle down effect to like the type of music that Tortoise makes. But I can kind of see that now, just rock and roll music having more like, I mean, you guys aren't rock and roll, but like you could you could make, I mean, some of the stuff, Beacons is a pretty rock and
No, I
roll
meant
album,
my
and
my my point was more that it was like it was almost anti.
right, yeah, yeah, you
It
guys
was anti
definitely
Nirvana. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in any like weird personal way. I just mean like it was like a vibraphone. It was like a dubby vibraphone.
right,
Like,
yeah.
you know what I
Well,
mean? So it's like,
yeah. It's like thoughtful music by well-rounded musicians. And like going back to what you were saying, and it's a sense that I definitely get from your other bandmates is like it seems like you guys are all the primary concern is service to the art rather than like I want like I want to play a sick lead here or something like
right.
Jeff doesn't really show off much, but I saw you guys like 7 years ago in Seattle, and there was just one at the end of one like little phrase. He just did this like incredible quick shred thing, and my friend David leaned over to me and he goes, "Just so you know," and I was like, "Yeah, holy shit," But like it seemed like you all have that capability, but it does seem like and it's in the service of the art. And I think because of your I hate to use this word because it's overdone, but this eclectic past or experience
Yeah.
and
No, it's true.
everything
Yeah.
kind of coming together, it's yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was just like, I was really just trying to respect this kind of new, I don't think it was exactly like a new genre necessarily. But for me, playing with those guys, it was definitely a new just world as far as
Yeah.
that it was sedate at times and
Mm-hmm.
and all the jokes about like, oh, their record collections, like these dudes with good record. But like, sure, what the fuck? Why not? Like, why not have good records? And you do get
Yeah,
turned on. You know what I mean? It's like
totally.
nobody, you know.
Yeah, it's not
I
created
don't
in a
think people
vacuum.
invent shit, huh?
That's yeah, this isn't created in a vacuum, stuff that we do.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I think like the best we can do, probably I mean, I don't know, in the last 30 years as far as new, I think is just successfully combining stuff that maybe hasn't been combined in that way and have an interesting
right,
personal take on it, but also like, and that's something I feel like you guys are masters at, like is this
right,
jazz?
right,
Is this electro? Is this prog rock? Like what are we doing?
right.
But
Mixing it
you
up.
yeah, and I think going back to the service of the art thing, like not having you guys not be show like there's no showboaty, and
Right.
like it
I
always
do a
brings you
little
to
bit,
that.
but yeah,
Well, that's something I also wanted to bring up. Like you're definitely the comic relief on stage. It's cool because everybody's kind of serious, but like you can keep it light, which I feel like is a really nice aspect to that. So like, are you like the goofball of the group, like on
you
tour and
know,
stuff?
I think it's really strange. I started, especially on this last run. I'm not a transcendental meditation person, and I have nothing
Mm-hmm.
against people that are,
Mm-hmm.
but I do meditate and stuff, and I do listen to like people, that talk about preparing yourself to perform. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, especially on this last leg, I was just so fucking grateful to do what I love to do after,
Mm-hmm.
when we tried to do that tour in October, and then I got fucking COVID.
Yeah. That's what
backstage.
did I tell you that me and my friend David drove down and got a hotel room and we were about to walk in?
I'm so
Hey,
sorry.
we got to go twice. No, I mean, we
really
had a
should
great
not have
time.
told anybody. I should have just played with a mask on. I should have drew a big fucking smiley face on my mask and played.
I mean, you were doing what you thought was right at the time.
Yeah,
like
I think it
we
was
had a
pretty
great
noble.
time. A good
Yeah.
excuse to go to Portland a couple times a year is always good. So
Yeah. I ended
but
up.
did that experience like that? You think that experience like really heightened that gratitude thing? Because like
definitely.
okay,
Some of our last tours, like for the last record, we did like 150 or 70 shows. So if you're on a bus crisscrossing Europe and you're drinking every day and smoking all the time, and you're gonna have some days where you get up on stage and you're like, you know what I mean? So that, but I honestly think I'm consciously trying to present positive energy.
Well, you definitely do that. Yeah.
It's not, I'm not forcing myself to have a good time or anything, but I'm like I said, I was just fucking psyched to to play the music I love for people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
totally. And it's I feel
I'm
like
interested in keeping that, like trying to take the time to make that. But shit gets in the way so often, man. It's crazy. I just DJ'd a wedding in Michigan last Saturday night. I haven't DJ'd in like 5 years or 4 years. I mean, you kind of don't lose it, but weddings are freaky. You know what I mean? You can have like
totally
the bride's mom can be like, I don't like that, or whatever.
Right.
But it was great. But then I had to do improv the next day, and it was just all fucking rushed. I forgot cables I needed for some synths, and I couldn't get my mind, everything I've just talked about, I couldn't do yesterday. I was just like, fuck, I gotta drive home, like, get a micro USB.
Right. No, and I think, I also do, I've practiced not regularly, but on and off meditation for, the last probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like, I've heard it said like, it's like the remembering, so in this case, like I have these tools. Oh shit, but I didn't use these tools. Oh, right. I have these tools. And like, those are the moments where like the learning happens. I don't think I said that very well, but it's like, it's not a foolproof thing. You're not going to be perfect, but
oh man,
sometimes you remind yourself like, oh yeah, I kind of do this to myself, don't I?
Yeah. You create this kind of whirlwind of like chaos or something.
Totally.
And then you're like, usually in hindsight, you're like, I really didn't need to freak out about that. Like this
Almost
wedding.
always,
Oh my God.
yeah.
I would wake up in the morning and be like, okay, I'll start with Earth, Wind and Fire. Got to get you into my life. Then I'll go, what's the second record?
Right. Yeah.
Like for 4 days or something,
Right.
Like, oh God.
And I feel like with something like that too, like, I mean, I've never DJ'd, but I'm sure you're reading the room, reading the mood and everything. So like, even if you had that hard list made, it might change in the moment, because you're like, this isn't the right flow or whatever. So yeah. Well, shit, we're blowing through this, and I'm sure it's not the funnest thing to give the oral history of Tortoise because I'm sure you've done that many times over the years.
Right.
I'm also curious, like I I think I think Herndon told me that you just got into modular maybe as well.
Yeah, pretty
Is that
much.
right?
Yeah, with COVID. Yeah.
Okay, right on.
Want to tap in on that for a sec?
Sure, unless we were going in a direction where you wanted to put a bow on something or anything, but
No, this is cool. This we could go here. Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
man, I've always been into synths. Um, Especially, yeah, like you're hanging out with McIntyre or whatever,
Right,
like,
totally.
and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, synthy, like who gets to hang out with a synthy, and
No
like,
shit. I've never played one.
so yeah. So I've always been into synth, and then I had a Krumar trilogy in the '80s, which was super nice. Basically, organ, string, and a synth tone
Okay. Okay.
with different, And I don't really remember that much about it, but it was my first synth. I remember, not knowing what any of the sync stuff was in the back or
Hmm.
anything like that. But then, the Elisa stuff came along. A friend of mine bought that drum machine, and I was like, what? And I was like, learn everything that this machine can
Hmm.
do. Same with the sequencer. And remember, those are like high tech back then. It was like, dude bought this expensive drum machine.
Yeah, and sometimes like I feel like back then they were often rack mount too. A lot of the
Yeah.
times, and yeah,
And
really
then I got a
divey. Weirdly.
Juno at some point
Oh,
from a
nice.
roommate for like 300. And that was really like, okay, yeah, filter, there's your octave, there's your resonance,
Hmm.
there's that, you know, kind of the same thing. Beat that till like how to make the space noises and, how to get we hit the mono and poly and it's like the phase or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I was always desktop kind of going for drum machines, 606.
Hmm.
So I got a 303 in Japan one day, which is a hilarious story we don't need to go into now. But my wife thought I didn't know. She thought I had the decimal point in the wrong place. She thought I was buying a $3,000 record.
Oh my god.
You know what I mean? So the
Uh-huh.
bank called and they're like, Dan's trying to spend 3,000 yen. And she's like, oh, he doesn't know. So she canceled it. She said told the bank to cancel it. It wasn't 3,000. What was it? It was like 20. It was 2,400 US.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So then and they're closing. They're like, okay. And I was like, all right, I got the cash at the hotel. I'll take the train to the hotel, go to a change place, get back
Oh
on
my
the train.
god.
And I did it. It was fine.
Oh,
So yeah, I always kind of had desktop kind of stuff. And then COVID. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. But it's super ironic. The devices I got are all digital. It's
mhm.
really like it's flipped because I got a shapeshifter, one of those
Oh yeah. The
wavetables. Super
Yeah.
nice. I love
That
it.
thing makes IntelliGel does some pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, and I got the QPOS. I
Oh
was just
yeah.
like, I got to go for that. I love that. And then I got the Herb Verb. So it's
Mhm.
like a digital
Mhm.
digital reverb, like a modular company teaming up with somebody to make a digital reverb. And that's the shapeshifter too. It's like a modular company teaming up with the old Cyclonics to build this
Right.
wavetable.
Yeah.
And then, so I was rocking that. And I would usually, like, some of my improv would be a drum machine. I just send the drum machine through the filter because then you can get
Mhm.
like the pinging kind of tones.
Right.
And then I would send like any kind of synth through the reverb and not
Mhm.
really use the shapeshifter out, like in improv too much. And
Yeah,
then I
you kind of
added,
need a lot of other components to make an
yeah.
oscillator really work for you in that. Yeah.
And then I went to, and then I got, what were the next things I got? Like a quad VCA, which I kind of hardly use.
Mhm.
One of those dope for 119s where it's like you can get the gate out of your drum machine or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
The
Mhm.
envelope, is it an
An
envelope or
envelope
something like that
follower.
where it just, yeah. And
Yeah.
then something else that's useful. I can't think of what it is now though.
Actually, you're making me
I don't
think
know.
of so I've got this thing from 4M.
Oh, and Pam's. I got it in Pam's new. That's the other
Oh
thing.
yeah, Pam's is awesome.
So, but I
so
already
this,
had the O Coast and
oh yeah, so that's a perfect start. So over
yeah.
here, these two white guys, these little modules are the percussion interface and percussion interface expander, but they come together. But it's got a 1/4-inch jack, so this is made for creating envelopes and gates off of
All right.
an
Yeah.
audio source. So yeah, I've been doing that a lot too.
Yeah. It's fun. I
Yeah.
still haven't really, I haven't integrated the acoustic kit with that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
That's a tough
But
integration.
acoustic kit, utilizing that and then going into the shapeshifter with those like overdrive kind of
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
oh my God. You know what
Well,
it was? It was that guy Mylar Melodies. You know that dude?
yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
saw him just demoing that shapeshifter and I was like, fucking A, man. I'll
Do
go
you
there for a minute.
do you feel comfortable like the navigation? Because I had it for a while and it was just a little more. I was pretty new to modular. It's pretty like menu divey for me. But like I feel like if you're coming up like with the type of gear you're talking about, like that was you had to do that stuff with early synth gear, so that's probably less of a turnoff.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's a little tricky. I get lost. I mean, one of my favorite drum machines is the MFB Tans mouse, which it's not. You don't even hit play. You got to hit like shift play. You know what I mean? It's like if I don't like literally if I don't use that thing for like 4 months, I gotta like teach myself how to
totally.
do it. It's
Yeah,
like so German. It's great.
I think the digital like analog thing, like I usually have a pretty like even maybe not even more not even anymore. I'm a lot more digital now because I mean a lot of this stuff is uh analog but with digital control or what, so it's all this like this hybrid, and it's really about like what are you trying to get out of it. And honestly, if you're going all analog, you're gonna just have a way bigger system and have to make way more connections. And if that's like what you're into about modular, which I get a lot of people are, then cool. But if you're wanting like something you could go out and play live with and not have to bring 7 cases, then yeah, it's all about the digital.
I mean,
stuff.
I love minimal music. You know what I mean? I love minimal music. It's like I don't know, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
To me, stuff doesn't have to be so dense.
I'm with you. One of my favorite electronic albums of all time is I think it's pronounced Varun, but it's Ryuichi Sakamoto and Alva Noto. They did like this whole run of albums, and it's like it's so beautiful and minimal, but it's I think it's just an absolute like monumental achievement in that regard. I'm with you.
I don't know it.
And finding like I found, so when I got into modulars, like, I'll start with making ambient swashes and then go in, and it's like, oh no, that's really fucking hard to do. And doing like that minimal thing within this environment, because everything's just going all the time. So you have to set up choke points, and it's a lot harder than I thought it's going to be.
Yeah, when I bought the O Coast, I was like, oh, this would be like, that's totally what I thought it was. I was like, oh, it's this weird esoteric device. It doesn't have a filter,
Yeah,
like,
right.
Totally going to be my like sound design. I took it home and I plugged it in. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, I got a very nice bass tone right here. Right, so funny. Yeah.
So have you used that to like, or do you like create are you like wanting to create like your own music with that? Or are you contributing what you're doing on modular to Tortoise? Or
yeah, I mean, I would bring that setup. I brought that setup to 2 of the sessions that we've done so far. The last one I didn't bring I brought the O Coast just to use at the sessions, but I didn't bring any of the rack mount stuff. Yeah, I was employing it a lot, actually. There's, a lot of like kind of single voice stuff. What I found, this killed me with the shapeshifter. I had this great idea and I was trying to work it out, and it was just going out of tune, like in a in an octave. Like I would go up an octave and I'd be like, whoa, and everybody would be like, whoa, dude, you know. Plus, I think I had chords in there too, so it's just kind of like, and
Oh,
I was like, okay, fuck it, I'll use something else, or even maybe disregarded the idea. And then I read when I got home after those sessions, I was like, you have to reset the tuning. And I'm like, it's a
what?
digital wavetable synthesizer.
You have to reset the tuning when you switch octaves?
Yeah, so basically you go in and you press a button and you press like C0 and then you press another button and then you go C1 and it calibrates.
Oh
So what
my
had
gosh.
happened somehow in these sessions, maybe from flying or traveling or something, but I'm like, that was the last thing I thought like, I just must be patching it dumb or doing something ridiculous telling it not to.
Right, yeah.
So that was a weird
Well,
one. That was a funny mistake.
yeah, that's kind of the danger of the super deep diving, lots of button combinations and many screens and stuff. I'm not saying that those are terrible things, because with those comes great,
it's true. Yeah,
expansive options and whatnot.
We all, you can tell when somebody spent a lot of time on something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's how I feel about the spherical wavetable navigator. Have you heard of this guy? This thing, so this is 6 oscillators that have 6 LFOs attached to them, and they're all kind of independently controllable, and it's super deep and digital, but there's no screens, and I feel like they need to be given an award for user interface like layout, because
so you're saying it's great.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's like I didn't have a sequencer for a long time. I was mostly just using samples and making big like swashes of sound. But after getting this, I was like, oh, I can make music with this and modular, because every time I wanted to make something with like a melody or, actually music sounding, I'd always just get like a desktop synth, because I could spend 6 hours trying to figure out how to do it on this, or I could just go play it over there.
Right. Yeah.
But now I'm starting to bridge that gap, but it's a long journey. And I always say it's the hardest and easiest instrument to learn how to play.
Right. Yeah. Right. To take it somewhere.
Are you still feeling stoked on it, or are you feeling like you want to keep pursuing it, or is it kind of like just one of the other like cool things in the arsenal that you might?
Oh, I'm super stoked. I get, I definitely get like the fever or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even
Totally.
Just feeling like, oh man, I got to go rock some beats. I do a lot of self-medication and stuff like that besides regular medication. So that's kind of part of it. Just kind of getting something going, and that's kind of like hype or whatever, and kind of
totally. Yeah.
Smoking one. But it's definitely complicated. I'm a parent too. And, my wife's an artist. So we have a super complicated lifestyle.
Yeah. I imagine
our kid is gifted in some ways, so they're not neurotypical, so that's a different kind of world to inhabit and to experience too, so
right.
But I gotta say, even with all that, I'm incredibly lucky to have a good chunk of time during the day, to practice drums and to dive into music and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I was an electrician for 5 years before. Well, actually, I was doing this podcast while I was an electrician and going to like an apprenticeship for it. So like, I don't know how I did a weekly podcast before I was able to stop being an electrician.
Right.
But now that I'm in a position where I mostly work from home, and a lot of my days sometimes are spent just like figuring out a module so I can make a video about it. Like I kind of try to lock into that thing you were talking about earlier when you're on stage, and just being like present and grateful for the moment that you're in. And I don't know, that it sounds cheesy or whatever, but like, it's also like, that's inspires me to want to play more too, just by having kind of a more, I don't have to like, oh my God, I only have 2 hours to do this. What do I do? Do I play bass? Do I record? Like,
Right.
it's nice to, and I think the awareness of that has served me very well, because something I always like kind of pair with that awareness is like, this could all just change and I could be back out in the 40-hour workforce at any moment, So,
or the Foo Fighters could need a new drummer and you could just fucking rip it.
That's true. I mean, Josh Freese, he ain't got shit on me, man. I've been playing this V-drum kit for a year.
He doesn't have electronic drums hooked up to an LFO with a ring mod that's LFO that's being modulated by another LFO that's being modulated by another LFO. He ain't got shit.
Oh man. Well, we're over an hour, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, because we're just talking about how you have some time during the day to do fun stuff.
Yeah.
Before we go, is there anything that you wanted to scream from the modular mountaintops, or say that we haven't covered, or anything to report on the new Tortoise record, or?
Yeah, I can't wait to finish it or just even work more on it. I'm like, God, it's so hard, like we're all just like in different parts of the world and extremely busy in different ways. We try to make plans, and it's like, before you know it, you're talking about like next year, it's
totally.
I'm like,
there's so many of you. And are you in Chicago still?
I'm still in Chicago, yep, in the Humboldt Park. So.
Okay. And then is Doug as well?
Doug's here, and our front of house Elliot is here too. So there's kind of like a little
so you're
trio
split between the Midwest and the West Coast with
yeah.
So,
and we've been recording in Portland, which has been great, super fun at Flora at Tucker's place. That's really nice. We had, I think, 3 sessions now. The first one was kind of a dud, but it was also a necessary reconnecting of musicians and stuff.
Right, because you guys probably hadn't spent a whole lot of time together during the pandemic.
None at all, really. It was really funny, too, because I came off of a 3-week improv tour of France. So I showed up and I was like, all right, let's make a record every 2 hours,
Right.
And everybody else was like, man, I haven't really played that much recently. And I'm like, well, just pick up an instrument and go for it, and we'll record it, and it'll be beautiful.
Right.
I had such a weird warped.
I was hanging out with these like people. That?
Huh?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Go ahead. You finished that thought. But
no, it's just like people, like that's what we were doing over there. It was just
right. So you were in that mode. And
oh my God. Yeah. Playing like 3 hours a day, like,
Yeah. Well, so with the Tortoise records, just real quick, like, do you guys like sometimes just start a jam and that becomes a track, or do people come in with their own ideas?
It's very rare that happens. Although there's kind of weird moments that'll happen that might get recorded. Like there was, it might have been on the internet, Johnny and I playing Gates of Steel. But like I was using the O coast and an analog delay, so it sounded like African or something like that.
Wow. Okay.
That's not going to be on record, but that's a weird, like you could be just trying to work on something and somebody might record it. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally.
I would say it was almost never what year it is. It's never really like, hey, try this with me, bro. Although that could happen for parts. But it's usually
right.
Like
maybe if there's a seed of an idea and then you kind of expand upon it.
Usually there's like a demo that you kind of start almost like replacing stuff. Like, oh, that's synth bass. Like, let's make that synth bass a real bass. At least my stuff is usually like kind of a recording that you just add to, and then you kind of build it up, and then you're like, well, it could use a chord change. So you kind of think of like where it could go. Okay. And with my ideas, I really hope that other people kind of grab them and kind of twist them some way. You know what I mean? Because
it always works out better that way.
Yeah, I never feel like I don't ever have a song. Although I guess I did this time, but I don't know.
Okay.
You still want more elements.
Yeah, for sure. I asked Herndon this question, and I hate that I can't stop myself from asking it because I think it's a dumb question to ask you, but I have to ask. Do you have a favorite Tortoise record?
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Maybe not one you think's the best. Maybe it has the best memory, or just for any reason
Yeah,
at all.
you know, I would say I'm just gonna say It's All Around You, just because I feel like it was like kind of I feel like there was like not a slight backlash, but we kind of like were dipping in some weird way, and I don't know, we weren't necessarily like darlings at that point or something, you know what I mean? But I feel like it's one of our most complex, kind of weird, dense records, and
That's
beautiful, you know what I mean? But
I think
I think it was like too complex. I don't know. This sounds like I'm making myself sound like an asshole, but it was like
no,
it
not at
was a
all.
little too complex for what was going on. And I harken back
Okay.
to this idea that like the White Stripes were huge then. You know
Oh,
what I
I
mean?
see. Right,
So think
yeah.
about it like that. You know, like
Uh-huh.
did people want, this weird like mutated Brazilian rhythm with a synth bass and a,
Right.
know.
It's funny, like when I was getting into Tortoise, like like that album had already existed because I got into you guys pretty late. But well, it's been like over 10 years now. But I remember like a few different people who were like Tortoise heads when I was getting in and talking. They always, that one seemed to be kind of like underrated in my opinion, because when I first listened to it, I was like, this is absolutely gorgeous. And then I've listened to it recently and I was like, this just sounds like a Tortoise record. I don't really like see what these couple people who was talking to, and I think maybe
Right.
you're like, that's a really, really not like, that makes a lot of sense, that contrast you're putting in, because it wasn't just the White Stripes, it was that whole thing of like, we're a band and there's two of us and we're not very good, but man, are we catchy,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's also, if you look at our trajectory, and it had been happening, you could say that Standards and It's All Around You are really like a rock band kind of instrumentation. You know what I mean?
Oh
At that
yeah,
point, it's
especially,
getting to
yeah.
kind of be like drums, guitar, organ, bass, and a vibraphone. You know what I mean? It starts to
Right.
become,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like, oh, like a weird hand drum and a synth through a ring mod with
Right. Yeah.
backwards drums and a drone,
Right. And was
which is kind of
Beacons
which,
after It's All Around You?
huh?
Was Beacons of Ancestorship, was that after It's All Around You?
Yeah, yeah.
So was that, because that one feels like your heaviest? Was that maybe like a reaction to what your perceived reaction of It's All Around You, or?
Yeah, I don't know that we ever, our real only reaction, our only filters, we really try to keep in places that we don't ever want to have something that is obviously a reference to something earlier. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're making a record, we'll have something will usually, like, we see these patterns form. We'll be like, oh, this is a more fucking gritty record. Let's do all these fucking super dirty drum. Like all our drums will be like super compressed and limited and run through this like old 2-channel mixer, You
Yeah.
get, I always see patterns, you know what I mean? And sometimes I'll tell people, sometimes I won't.
Mm-hmm.
We have a new pattern with a new record where if it's not in an odd time signature, if it's in 4 or 8 or whatever, then the bar length is going to be an odd number. You know what I mean? So if
And that
it's
wasn't
4/4,
something
it's going to be
talked about.
5 bars of 4/4.
And this was something that you've just noticed and wasn't talked about. Oh my God, that's fucking
Yeah,
hilarious.
I would just notice it in different songs. I'd be like, oh, it's like, because Doug will always write in like a kind of a strange, his phrases will be in like really creative lengths. And I'll always do like, we had the song, I wrote it and I know it's 5 bars of 4. And here I'm like playing this bass line, but I'm so concentrating on the bass line that I'm playing 4 bars. So then I'm
I was
listening
just
to the
recording
playback.
some
I'm
the
like,
other day.
man, why is it? I was like, why does this sound like I'm wrong almost all the time? And then it was like, I could tell it was my blood sugar. I was like, let's go get lunch, you know. And while I'm eating lunch, I'm like, that bass line was not 5 measures long.
That's
like,
another fun
God,
thing about like aging as you're like continuing to be a musician. You just start noticing like these like, oh yeah, that's like I need to eat food at some point. I can't just like be in here for
just
15
like
hours.
rookie mistakes, you know. I'm like, okay, you know, and like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time and letting me just like nerd out with you here. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for rapping.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like I didn't get to ask you enough questions, but
I mean,
you know what I'll do? I'll just tune in. I'll just tune into more podcasts, and I'll get to know you a little more.
There you go. Or we can have you back for episode 2, but I'll be the guest, and you can be my guest host.
I did really want to fuck with you too. I was like, I kind of have to set up a vocoder, and then I kind of had,
dude,
I kind of wanted to set up. What's the thing I got from Earthquaker where it's like a sub and bit cruncher where it's like, me talking about a an octave lower, with some nice verb. And,
I had a guy
we'll do it again
once.
Thank you, Tim, and good luck with this. Good luck with your endeavors.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the new record, and good luck with all the other stuff that you've got going on. All right, that is our episode. Thank you so much for coming back to Podular Modcast. Thank you to Dan for his time. Thank you to all the sponsors, For a Mess, After Later Audio, Patrick Seattle, and Novation. What else? Thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. Thank you if you are watching or listening to this episode. If you want to subscribe over there on YouTube, I'd greatly appreciate that. And don't forget that I'm down to clown with a little video collaboration. So if you need a music video for one of your tracks or want some live visuals, then hit me up. Don't forget about the Gay Daisy Carnival and Tacoma Porch Fest. I think that's about it. I think this week's secret word is gonna be steady. Until next week.